Hey guys, Chris here with Work to Game, and this week we'll be talking about Fortnite and Battle Royale as a game type. What is that going to do as far as impact to the rest of the gaming industry as a whole? This is State of the Game, one of my favorite segments, so be sure you go back and watch some of our older ones. These are absolutely only made possible by the subscribers over on Twitch, Patreons, sponsors here on YouTube, just all the fan-funded greatness that you guys bring us. Enjoy! So Fortnite has been in the news like crazy lately. Fortnite has had tremendous success, and this is not just in the few celebrities that are engaging to watch and their success on Twitch. This also has to do with absolutely how much they have taken every platform by storm, not only in how many players are playing, but also in things like the sheer income they brought in, especially for a free-to-play game. And so there's a couple of questions when we talk about something like this, changing the industry, that really go beyond whether or not you like this game and whether or not this game is for you to play. And so let's dive into those. The first is, how come Fortnite didn't happen earlier? How come Battle Royale is just now a game type? When you see something take this level of success, why was this not done sooner? And the obvious answer is technology. When we think back to some of the great iconic games of past generations, going back all the way to things like N64, where multiplayer was king, and you had GoldenEye, and you have all of these other fantastic games where you have multiplayer going into the first Halos, going on into, even as we start to talk about the first building games, going back to this kind of open sandbox that Fortnite is tapping into, talking about games like Minecraft. As we look through games like this, why did Fortnite not pop up sooner? And technology is a big piece of that. The ability to put 100 people versus 100 people, while it may have been done in past games like EVE Online and like ESO's PvP, this is one of the first times that you have a first-person shooter that people can actively get tossed into large-scale online content on a huge map instantly with no lag, no real hardware requirements that are a big issue at the time of publication. And that is what makes Fortnite possible now. So the second thing is, then why did Fortnite get popular now? And that has a lot more to do with the way gaming has changed over the last decade, where it has moved from a lot more of being this hobby and this things that kids play into more and more being online accepted entertainment. You have huge success with Major League Gaming tournaments, games like League of Legends and Hearthstone and StarCraft, and all of these games have these major followings, not just in select countries, but worldwide, with players coming from all over to compete for enormous cash prizes. And out of those cash prizes, you have spun off these entire new careers that can make more money and be more successful than ever before. That's things like commentators, that's things like Twitch streamers, that's things like YouTubers that get into either funny moments or talking about the news and the updates, or putting out guides. And so there is this entire industry that is spawned around these that can support them. And those industries allow these developers to do things like give early access out as a cheap form of marketing, because the people who want the guides and the early access and the update videos need to have access to that content before the embargo so that they can get a jump on other creators. So they're happy to take that on for free because they make their money off of the content they sell on platforms like YouTube and Twitch. However, that means that all that publicity is getting out there for the game, really only having to pay them either very small moderate amounts of money or no money at all, and just give them free access to a game, which is giving out one game key in trade for exposing it to thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of players. And we can get into what Fortnite does over its past competitors, because PUBG is not the only game that has come out against Fortnite, maybe even predated Fortnite. Even if we limit it only to games that predated Fortnite, it has so many influences from past games. And we're going to see a huge influx of developers trying to get on this bandwagon, just like we have with every other major genre when it hits mainstream. World of Warcraft was not the first MMO, but it was the first MMO to be widely socially acceptable to pay subscription for an online video game. It took the industry by storm and has paved the way for a lot of other MMOs to have huge and wonderful success. Games like Final Fantasy and games like Guild Wars. These are games that really their success hinged upon early World of Warcraft success. Now, World of Warcraft in this case happens to still be the industry leader, but not every game that's iconic like this gets to keep their lead spot. When you look at how Halo made it widely acceptable to play online first-person shooter games, you can now look forward and say, well, Call of Duty has debatably taken that spot from them, and there are plenty of other competitors that you could throw in the ring. An entire debate could be had on which first-person shooter was the most influential, but what we can't argue is that that genre is now well established and is not going anywhere anytime soon. World of Warcraft is obviously the name brand when an average person thinks of MMO, but there are dozens of them in the space, many of them highly profitable and delivering great content to a substantial player base on a regular basis. So what Fortnite did unique is a couple of things. They marketed well, but League of Legends did the same thing. They delivered a unique open sandbox experience, but Minecraft already had that as their main way of playing games. They built a game that had huge success with an online presence, but MMOs have been doing that for years. And so really Fortnite is just a unique combination of things at a unique point in time that has just struck all the right things with all the right people and is experiencing great success because of it. I don't know whether or not you like Fortnite, but what can't be argued is that Fortnite is having an impact on not only the gaming industry, but people outside of the gaming industry, as we see coverage from major outlets. And we see people getting into this game and asking questions like, what is Battle Royale? And so Battle Royale is unique in that it might be one of the new definitions of MMO, massively multiplayer. What does that mean now? When you think of World of Warcraft, you think of millions of subscribers. But Fortnite is talking about there being hundreds of people in a game together regularly. 100 people playing in the same map at the same time, starting with nothing and fighting until there is either 1, 2, 5, or 50 people left, depending on the game mode, is incredibly entertaining to watch. And it plays off of that very Hunger Games-esque need to watch people just go in and fight until there is absolutely no possible tension or excitement left in the game mode, ending and then just walking away. We don't ask for player development. We don't ask for character development. There doesn't need to be any loot afterwards. I can literally start with nothing, and at the end I can give that character and all of that progression up in trade for starting another round. And that is something that is unique to this game type. In MMOs, you have a character that you build on for years on end, and we see those RPG elements making its way into other games outside of MMOs because RPGs are popular. This kind of desire to grow something is one of the things behind things like Farmville and all of these other simulators that are dominating the mobile space and social media pages and things like that. But when you remove these RPG elements and you trade them for just raw entertainment value, where it is debatably just as fun to watch somebody like Ninja play as it is to play yourself, you have a whole new money-making machine on your hands. And so the question becomes, now that we know it's important, now that we know kind of how it got to be here by just guessing at the factors that led us to what we are today, the really important question is not any of what got us here, because whether or not we like it, whether or not we understand how we got here, we are here. The question is now, how does this impact existing and future games? When WoW and Final Fantasy and all these games experience huge success, you see a lot of small developers aiming to launch their own version of MMO, hoping it's unique and hoping that it's highly successful. When League of Legends and Dota and HOTS, and all these games dominate the MOBA space, you see a ton of games saying, this is our version of a MOBA. And some of them succeed and some don't. And each time we go through a major iteration like this, where we have a new game type appear and other people hop on board, some of them are able to make money at this. You have mobile game platforms that have come out and been enormously successful with very little resource investment. But when we talk about Battle Royale, this is a game type that, at least in my opinion, only succeeds when you have a big enough population to make a big game possible. If that game is 100 people, for example, like Fortnite, the question is, do you have consistent lobbies where 100 people available is no big deal? If you're a beginning developer and you only have 2,000 players in your player base, there could be times that I have to wait for a game. So a game like this doesn't work, because the whole benefit is this very World of Tanks style where when one game ends, I can literally leave that game to finish itself on its server, and I can just hop onto another server and play. But this time I don't have to own a second tank to do it. So when wondering kind of what impact this could have, we say, okay, well, we know that first of all, when it comes to future games, everything that was just said is going to come true. There are going to be a huge number of Battle Royale games to come out over the next 12 to 24 months. And there are going to be developers that are going to come out with unique and new ideas that, while that game may not succeed, could make its way into the major titles like PUBG and Fortnite. There are also going to be developers that have no business being in the space, coming into the space and falling on their face because they're not coming out with anything new and inventive, and they're not doing it better than the games that are already established. But what impact is it going to have on games that are not Battle Royale style? What impact is it going to have on games like World of Warcraft and Final Fantasy XIV Online? Are we going to see them starting to make game modes that don't just slightly follow Fortnite, but actually large scale move in a new and different direction, taking inspiration from Fortnite, where they have the unique ability to use existing classes like crafters and gatherers to have the building be this either a perpetual game mode where we're fighting over like a world PvP zone that takes place even when you're not online and you can check in via one of their apps, or something where you go in and you build towards a common goal on a large team, and you come in with nothing and you harvest materials and you build with materials and you take each other on in a new and different way. Are you going to see them scaling towards larger and larger battlegrounds because they both already have the player base to do so? Unlike a new developer trying to get into the Battle Royale space, World of Warcraft has the unique ability of already knowing that hundreds of battlegrounds are going on at a given time across their existing server structure. And Final Fantasy, with the exception of their differences in server structure from WoW, have the second largest player base in MMOs and could very easily move alongside their normal patches towards a very easy to grasp battleground system. They have simplified PvP abilities, and they could absolutely cater themselves to giving their crafters and their gatherers the ability to queue and contribute in their own unique way that could absolutely pay tribute to a Battle Royale type game. And whether or not these games are for you, the question is, are they for the population as a whole? Are these games going to be successful? Will they add value to these titles, or will they spend developers' time developing something that we don't want to engage with? There is a real risk when you change everything and you go for something all new and different that you accidentally pull a game like a Destiny 2, where your development cycle leaves certain things out and you end up alienating your player base and having an enormous set of issues not long after the launch of something new and different. And there's a common argument that this is just following a trend or a fad, or it's companies just trying to make money. But my issue with that argument is that that is a bad thing, I guess. That when people say that, they typically mean that as a negative statement. But following a trend just means that a game is trying to make you happy. They're looking at things that are going on in gaming and they're saying, if you like that, we'd be happy to move in that direction. So it means they're listening. And so if there is a huge number of players moving in a certain direction, whether or not that's my favorite, I would love for a game like World of Warcraft or Final Fantasy to cater to this, because unlike other games, unlike other developers, where Bethesda would stop development on one team or shift resources to a team that would build a standalone Battle Royale game to compete in this space, this is a little different in that these games are so broad that this would just be an additional facet. You might play World of Warcraft and never get involved in battle pets or end game raiding or mythic dungeons. You might play Final Fantasy and never get into crafters or gatherers or chocobo races or any of these other things, and the game is still plenty big for you. You don't have to own a house to be a Final Fantasy player that is having a blast in the game. You don't have to go and have all of the mounts in World of Warcraft. You can have 100 mounts or more and still not have to go after these mounts that are ridiculous to get. And so both of these games have huge progression systems that large portions of their player base never interact with, and they are still successful just the same. So to have a battle royale type system layered on top of their existing PvPs doesn't mean that they have to alienate anybody. It could just be something new and different. And so if we look at World of Warcraft, Final Fantasy, League of Legends, Call of Duty, any major title, GTA, that when you say it, your parents have heard of it and your grandparents have heard of it, and all these people who in your life may never have played video games recognize the name, not just because you've talked about it, but because people at work have talked about it, or major news outlets have covered stories dealing with it. It's interesting to look at the lasting impacts of those games and kind of what that means for gaming as a whole. And Battle Royale seems to be that newest thing. Whether or not it's here to stay, it will be leaving an impact. So looking at the success of Fortnite today, it's easy to ask, how did this come to be? And it's easy to say, well, it wasn't possible before, but because of some major advances in technology and some major changes in the gaming community and in the development of games and what players like today, that there is a unique time that players want a game like this and the technology exists. It is also, well, why this game over other games? And when you look at the way they marketed it, the way they developed it, the way they're managing it, it is just hitting on all cylinders, and it is absolutely crushing any competition, regardless of the fact that it's free to play. Whereas in a MMO space would typically be a mark against you, where you're always seen as this second-rate game, whether or not you are, because there's no subscription tied to you. Fortnite seems to have just shrugged off the fact that free-to-play is typically said as a bad or neutral statement into this positive thing that, wow, I can't believe PUBG charged people money and it's not as good. And so when you look at those two things, it is easy to see how the first part of this video made sense. But as we talk about the impact, this gets a lot more vague. And so my question to you guys is, what does that mean for gaming? Does Battle Royale have a place in existing MMOs? Does Battle Royale have a place in the mobile game market? Does it have a place in social games? Does this change the social aspect of games to be more multiplayer? Does multiplayer have to mean more than just 2 or 3 or 4 people playing together? Does it now mean 100 or 200? Or as we talk about the success of quiz games and things like that now, where you have thousands of people interacting, as games and social media platforms and all internet businesses realize that they have the ability to leverage thousands, if not millions of eyeballs at a single time and put an advertiser or an idea in front of them and then sell that, are we going to see the term multiplayer take on a new definition in society, where it is now socially accepted to take place in games that have hundreds of thousands of people watching a single round at a time? And if so, does that focus more towards the competitive aspect, where there's these kind of celebrity gamers and we're tuning in to watch people like Ninja play? Or does this mean that this is everybody partaking and anybody can win? You know, kind of like how Fortnite is now for an everyday player. Which direction goes with this? Because Fortnite seems to both be succeeding in its competitive nature and in its accessibility to an everyday person, as opposed to something like StarCraft 2 that was heavily geared towards the tournament scene. And then you think of things like Candy Crush, that there is no competitive scene, but it is widely popular and pervasive across all of society. So I do think Fortnite is going to have an impact. I do think we're going to see game modes and MMOs over the next round of expansions take this on and engage with it in a new and unique way, taking blatant inspiration from the fact that we as players and we as gamers have voted by having an incredibly popular game that has elements to it that they have never touched before. We have told them that whether or not they were tossing these ideas around in a dev room, that this is a good idea and that we will give them our time and therefore our money. So what do you guys think? What kind of games do you see Battle Royale elements coming into? What elements do you think will make it into those games? And do you think that's a good idea? Is that a good thing, or is it just a fad where it'll weed itself out over time? What is the lasting impact? What is both the impact in 2018, where it's short term, and we know that there's going to be a round of Battle Royale games this year, and what is the impact 10 years from now when we look back and there's an idea that is in every game or a large number of games at the time, and we say, where did this come from? And it came from this point in history. This was the moment where that solidly got entrenched in gaming and was there to stay. This has been Chris with Work to Game. I hope you guys just enjoyed this brief thought into just kind of what is going on in gaming. It's not really tied to a news, it's not really tied to stats or an opinion. It's just something that's fascinating and large scale, and it's in a segment that we don't really have named for anything else, called State of the Game. And this is where we explore all kinds of things, not just current trends, but things like, does violence have a place in video games? And what is the state of Anthem? And what kind of things we can talk about loot boxes, and we can talk about politics and religion and how they relate to gaming. So if you have another topic, feel free to leave it in the comments below. If you have an opinion on this, we would love to engage in the comments section, maybe move to a community feedback if there's enough going on down there. So definitely leave your opinion below. We would love to hear it. Once again, this has been Chris with Work to Game. Thank you guys so much for hanging out, and I will see you next time. Hey you! Especially if you're a new face, welcome to the workforce. If you want to hit that subscribe button to say you like us, we'd really appreciate it. But there's a little bell next to it if you really like a channel, and you can go ahead and hit that if you'd like to be notified. Be sure that if that thing lets you know, hey, do you always want to be notified, or you just sometimes want to be notified, that you tell it, oh man, I actually meant by notified, notified. So why don't you give that a click, and we hope to see you around in our next video.